So we are going to discuss about Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Act 1952. And in this, we have already discussed the introduction part, why Employees Provident Fund is important and what are different benefits that are provided to the employees when this EPF Act talks about different social security benefits and financial security benefits. What are the different obligations on employer, what is the contribution, and how employees can just extract their different benefits out of this EPF Act 1952. We have already discussed this part in the previous session. In today's session, what we are going to discuss about is the contribution part, that how the contribution from employee and employer is done in the EPF Act. So we all understand that there are two types of contribution are to be done in the EPF Act, one from the employee side and another from the employer side. The contribution rate is 12% and 10% from employee side. Now let me tell you what exactly this 12% and 10%. So see this chart I have got from the EPFO website, that is Employee Provident Fund Organization website. In the previous session also I discussed that EPFO website, which is run by Ministry of Labor, is that website takes care of providing all the information related to EPF Act amendments that happen time to time from the government side. So this PDF clip of PDF I have taken from that site so that I get the latest data about EPF. Here it is written 12% and 10% from employee side. So what does this 10% mean? 10% rate is applicable for any establishment in which less than 20 employees are employed. So there are two conditions wherein EPF Act is implied. One is the organization where less than 20 employees are employed and the organization where more than 20 employees are employed. So in case the organization where less than 20 employees are employed, only 10% of the basic plus dearness allowances would be deducted for the EPF contribution from employee side. I would be discussing about this contribution in very brief in the coming slide. So for just a crisp and introductory part regarding the contribution, just understand there are two types of rate for employee. Now if I talk about employer part, difference of employee contribution share and pension contribution. I'll be talking about these concept in the coming slide, that what is the difference of employee provident and the pension contribution. In previous session itself, we had discussed that there are two types of contribution which is done from the employer side. One is done for the Employee Provident Fund and second is done from the, let me take you to that slide. Yeah. So what this I had discussed that there are different schemes that come under the Employee Provident Fund. One is Provident Fund. So one part of contribution which is done from the employer side goes to the Employee Provident Fund and another part goes to the employees pension scheme. So there is a proper percentage which is mentioned that what contribution would be going to the EPS and what would go to the EPF, that is Employee Provident Fund. So we'll try to understand this part with brief on the contribution part. So before that, I would like to take you to the amendment that government has done in the EPF area. You see that this news is about the Economic Times .indiatimes.com. So what news had come that initially the wage limit, the wage on which EPF contribution is calculated was 6,500. That means the basic and dearness allowances would be 6,500. But when amendment was done, yes. So when amendment was done from the government side, that was done in 2014 itself, that 6,500 has been increased to 15,000. I hope this slide is visible to all of you. So very minutely, you can just read that proposal in the draft bill is the amendment in the definition of wage. This proposal is likely to affect those whose current basic salary does not exceed rupees 15,000 per month. As per the current law, for your EPF contribution, wage is defined as sum of basic pay, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance. If your basic pay exceeds 15,000, then your EPF contribution may be calculated only on basic pay. However, if your basic pay does not exceed rupees 15,000, then all other allowances, now different allowances which companies pay you, but except for house rent allowance, HRA nahi aayega usme, overtime allowances, bonus, commission, or presents by the employer. So different allowances which are specifically mentioned, that should not come under the allowance part. To be taken into consideration for the calculation of EPF, those would be HRA, overtime, bonus, commission, or presents by the employer. So these are the allowances would be kept apart when calculation on EPF on the wages would be done. So what do we consider while calculation? Basic plus DA plus retaining allowances. So what sort of retaining allowances may be there? So let's read ahead. The new proposed definition of wage for EPF contribution includes basic DA, retaining allowances, and other allowances such as special allowances, LTA, etc. So I hope the people who have their family members in the government organization, they must be availing some LTA. LTA जो होता है वो आपका traveling facilities दी जाती है, जिसमें to motivate employees, they are given some holiday tours, some towards that is reimbursed by the organization. So certain special allowances or LT or different allowances that should be except from these allowances which are mentioned here in the bracket, they may be taken into consideration as a wage when EPF would be calculated. For the purpose of calculation of EPF contribution, the limit to rupees 15,000 still remains, but basic plus DA plus retaining allowances, the accumulation of all these components of the wage, basic wage, should not exceed 15,000. So 15,000 has been kept as a basic wage on which EPF would be calculated. The excluded allowances and benefit as per new proposed definition are as follows. So these are the allowances which would be kept excluded from the allowances for the calculation of EPF. So bonus would not be taken, housing accommodation would not be taken, contribution paid by employer to any person or provident fund and interest which may have accrued thereon would not be included, conveyance, HRA, overtime allowance, commission payable. So these are the different components which have been kept away from the area of basic wage for the calculation of EPF. So let's come to another part which is very important. Now you see that your contribution goes to the EPF account, right? So you must be thinking that at what rate I would get interest on the amount which is getting accumulated into the EPF account, because you'll see that if I get my amount deducted, that means 12% from the employee side, what sort of interest should I get from the government? Because if I keep this amount in my bank account, I'll get some interest. If I get it FD, I'll get some interest. So time to time, the PF interest rate also gets amended. In 2017-18, on PF amount, 8.55 interest used to be given to the employees. 18-19, it increased to 8.65%, and in 19-20, right now till date, it is 8.65%. That means if your PF amount is deducted from your salary, then that amount would go to the EPF organization, and yearly you will get 8.65% on your amount. Not bad, because we see the FD rates that keeps fluctuating, but once the EPF interest rate is fixed, unless amendments are done, that interest doesn't fluctuate. So I think it's a good rate, 8.65%, if you're getting on the PF amount. And moreover, not you are just contributing 12% of your salary, and rest 12% is being contributed by your employer. So you have double benefit. You get 50% contribution from the employer side, and then you get this interest rate as well on the yearly basis. So let's come to the EPF contribution by employer and employer. We'll discuss briefly about it. So depending on the entity contribution towards EPF, there are two components of contribution, namely employee and employer. So what do we do? I've already said that employee also contribute and employer also contribute. The employee contributes 12% of basic salary plus dearness allowances and retaining allowances that I discussed toward its EPF account. So from your basic salary plus dearness allowance, 12% would be deducted every month. the subject to the case that your salary should be 15,000 or below 15,000. I'll come to that part as well. When your salary is, your basics is more than 15,000, I'll come to that part as well. The employee has to contribute a lower contribution of 10% in case the entity has less than 20 employees. I've already discussed this part. Now come to this one. Employee pension scheme. Here, 12% contribution by the employee. 12% is contributed by employer, out of which 8.33% is credited to employee pension fund. See, two type of fund I was talking about: employee provident fund, employee pension fund. So in pension fund, when employer, your 12% would be straightforwardly deducted from your basic plus DA. But when it comes to employer side, the total 12% is divided in two parts: 8.33% and 3.67%. So when you add these both percentage, you will get this 12%. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now let me tell you the logic behind this. So when I talk about contribution from employer side, the basic plus DA plus retaining allowances, percentage of 8.33 would be credit to employee pension, and the rest 3.67% would be transferred to the PF account. The calculation part I'll be showing you through Excel sheet. So just before going to the calculation, please understand this concept. Now if I talk about EPS, wherein my 8.33% goes from the employer side, not employee, only employer. Employee pension scheme subject to a ceiling of 1250 per month if the salary of the employee is 15,000 or more. So when you calculate 8.33% of 15,000, you will get 1250. You can just check it out and you will get to know that 15,000 का 8.33% कितना होता है? 1,250. So this 15,000 has been kept as a cap, that whensoever, no matter whatever is your basic wages, if it is more than 15,000, no matter whatever it is, but your salary but your contribution for EPS would be calculated on 8.33% only. That would be 1250. So this 1250 amount would go there. Now, talking about the next part is EDLI. I had discussed in previous session that we have EDLI, that is Employees Deposit Insurance, Linked Insurance, and this talks about that in your government, when government talks about EPF account, it talks about not only just regarding that how your PF and pension is being taken care of, but your insurance part is also taken care of. That's why 0.5% of